In our Ignite recap, we covered a lot around AI and neural processing and all this cool stuff. And I kind of ran out of time toward the end to get into all the stuff that happened in Purview. But I did say they could have had their own entire Ignite just for the Purview team. And the things that have come out since then, even since Ignite, have just been really cool. So I wanted to give a little bit of space to talk about sensitivity labeling, how it's changing, what's improving about it, and honestly, how to get started. Because just this month alone, I've sat in front of multiple groups of people, some one-to-many events, some one-on-one events, but there's a recurring theme that sensitivity and labeling is critical, but there's some pretty big barriers to early success. So let's talk about what sensitivity labels are. They're intended to be an easy button for security for your files, for your emails, for your sites. And the way that we build them is we define a label, right? Give it a name. Define when a document receives that label. Does it get watermarked? Does it get encrypted? Who then has access to that document or that file or that email, that site, whatever? How long should they retain access to it? Should they be able to get to it offline? There's a lot of stuff that goes into a label. But just creating the label, but just creating the label isn't really job done. Because really, once a label is created, we're just sticking it in a bank of labels. Much like you could actually, in Active Directory, build all of your GPOs right into the GPO bank, and then link them to other OUs, okay? So it's very similar to that. We build our labels. Now, in the label builder, there is then a step that prompts you to create a label policy for that label. You don't have to do that. That label policy, though, is what then enables you to present that label, that easy button, to the users to interact with. Now, that interaction used to be really simple. Back in ye olden days of Azure Information Protection and the AIP labeling client that was installed on computers, you would simply turn on a visible bar. It would show up in all of your Office applications, and users would just click on it, and they got colors, although you did not define those colors. Those colors are presented with a name. Users could hover over them, get a description of what the label would do. And that was great, except that it wasn't integrated into any of the apps. You had to install it, and there was not parity across all the platforms that are supported. So Microsoft ripped out the labeling client, deprecated it, and replaced it with in-app sensitivity labeling. The trouble with that is, that went to a drop-down button that didn't really declare itself very boldly. Users struggled to find it. I struggled to find it. And when they did find it, what they were generally presented with was a pretty nondescript drop-down list of label names. Trying to get users on board with the idea that it was an easy button lost some of its shiny, because it wasn't super easy, and it wasn't a very plain button. So, one of the most amazing features that I saw introduced at Ignite is changing the default experience for where labels actually occur. Now, we've always been able to do things like force a user to choose a label in order to save the file. But that puts an interstitial in front of them that slows it down. What we've got now, though, is Microsoft has actually integrated the labeling experience into the file save experience. It's directly in there. On the very top bar, you see that the file is saving. If you click on that file name, it'll drop down and the sensitivity labels will be there, along with the new ability for you to predefine what color your labels should present to your users. Now, the guidance hasn't changed on presenting only 5 labels to any given group of users, but you can now control the color of those labels. And it's not just lowest and highest. You can define those colors to be anything you want. Well, within reason, there's like 10 colors in each one. So, the experience is now more streamlined with the saving experience, which is where you expect the interruption to occur anyway. We're able to choose our colors, and that opens up an opportunity to solve a question that admins have been asking for a long time. Where do I start? I mean, what do you recommend is the question I get a lot, right? How do you label internally? And again, we try not to present more than 5 labels to users. We try to make sure that the purposes of those labels are clear. But for folks just getting started out, or even folks looking to make a massive improvement, what I found is it is very easy to let someone else make the decision, and that someone else is the creator of the TLP protocol. That is the traffic light protocol. And yes, I'm sorry for 2 protocols. But TLP allows you to align your sensitivity labels with the type of harm they represent to your organization. If this thing were to get out, it would do no harm. Green light. Traffic light, green, right? If this document were to get out, it might cause some harm. We could recover from it. It could be yellow. And obviously, red. Don't let this thing get out. It's going to cause immediate irreparable harm. And to be clear, I mean, I've built some of this into my demo tenant, and we will show some of this in future sensitivity events and security events. But it is such an easier way to get started by pointing at an existing body of work and say, there is this benchmark. There is this standard. We don't have to invent this. TLP, if you're not familiar with it, look it up. It generally aligns with the most common requests that we hear for baseline security. Now, that's not all that came out, right? Streamlined, easy button deployment, the color of the label, those are great. Back in June, Microsoft announced that they were going to support labeling native within Adobe Acrobat products. And that became generally available, I want to say late July. And that was great, because now we didn't have to do something custom to make labels work in PDFs. But it still didn't go far enough, because a document that was labeled internal or TLP yellow, if you cut an export to a PDF, you'd start all over again. That's been fixed. Microsoft now supports export to PDF, retaining the label that the document originally had. And if users do things like changing document labels, we can do more than simply generating an administrative alert now. We can actually use that as a triggering event in an insider risk management incident. So sensitivity labels have grown a lot. They've moved out a lot across organizational boundaries in terms of our ability to do more with emails and documents and files and stuff. So super awesome. The last piece of the puzzle though, and anybody who's watched webinar labels and building them, or has done, building themselves, has probably noticed the grayed out group sense sites in the label builder. Now you can click on that and go to documentation and tell you how to enable your Azure Active Directory groups to support default labeling policies that follow them into their teams' chats and channels. And it's awesome. I'm going to say though, having just gone through the process of enabling that on another tenant, it still has some bugs, kinks to work out. Each each learn document sends you to another learn document that sends you to another learn document. There are way too many steps involved to get that to work. Once it does work though, again, a team and teams and channels in those teams will actually then pick up labeling policies based on the labels you've assigned to the group in Azure AD, except those files. And again, that's where there's still some opportunities for growth. Those files will live in a SharePoint document library. But the one thing that was bridged, the gap that was bridged with regard to that discrepancy, between the group and the library is that now you can actually browse to the library, document library, and label documents in place without having to open them. And that is super cool. That gives users, see, I've been talking about self-service stuff for users, right? It's the best thing in the world. So in Defender for Cloud Apps, I can dig through my entire digital estate, find all the files that are there, and change sensitivity labels on files that are mislabeled. But that was still a me thing. That still meant it's incumbent on me to know that something had been mislabeled, something was inappropriate. This, though, puts the work back into the hands of the team's owners themselves. They can now find the files that are in their repositories, and they can assign the correct labels in place. And they can now co-author encrypted documents across Windows, iOS, Android, I want to say Mac OS. That was super cool. I got to demonstrate that live to a customer just yesterday. A lot of big raised eyebrows. And it's a fair point, right? It's all great to tell you you can co-author, real-time co-author files that are labeled and encrypted. That whole strategy falls apart, though, when you hit the mobile device. No longer. So, this is much longer than I intended to cover labels. You see, there's been so much, and we would have lost a whole quarter of the webinar if I covered it there. Anyway, thanks for joining. Hope you'll join us in November for Priva and December for a sit-down fireside chat around Viva. Catch you next time.